So, what is React, or React.js as it's actually called, and why would we use it? Well, to answer that first question, what it is, we can of course visit react.js.org, the official React.js webpage. And there we learn that React is a JavaScript library for building user interfaces. That's a nice sentence. But what exactly does that mean? Consider an example like Netflix service, Netflix website and application. This application is highly interactive and runs pretty smoothly when we work with it. It's easy to use, and we don't have to wait for anything to load. We have nice transitions. If we go to the My List page, that transition happens pretty much instantly. We don't seem to wait for a new page to load here, and that's all pretty nice. And here I'm using Netflix in my browser, so this is a website here. Now, when we use a service like Netflix, it might almost feel a bit like a mobile app, even though I am using the website here. Because mobile apps give us this great, highly reactive user experience. From mobile apps, we're used that we have smooth transitions, that it's fun to use that app, and that things happen instantly. And at least traditionally, websites didn't always feel like this. Traditionally, in websites, when we, for example, clicked a link or a button, a request was sent to a server and a new HTML page was sent back to the browser where it then could be displayed. And therefore, traditionally, websites could feel a bit clunky. We might have that latency where we wait for this new HTML page to load, and so on. And it's this request and response cycle which we can break up with JavaScript. So at this point, we don't even need React. It's just JavaScript which can help us here. Because JavaScript is a programming language that allows us as a developer to run logic in the browser. And the great thing about that logic in the browser is that it can do things that manipulate what the user sees. JavaScript in the browser is able to manipulate the so-called DOM, the HTML elements that are rendered onto the screen. We can manipulate this with JavaScript. And that allows us to change what the user sees without fetching a new HTML page. We don't need to request a new HTML page just to present something different to the user. So that's why JavaScript can help us. And since React is a JavaScript library, it looks like it can also help us with that. It might be an extra building block. And indeed, React.js is a client-side JavaScript library. It helps us with writing that client-side JavaScript code, and it's all about building modern, reactive user interfaces for websites. And in this course, you're going to learn about all the different features and tools React.js has and gives you that make building complex user interfaces easy. But one question remains. Why do we need React? Because at this point we know that JavaScript is helpful. And I hope I could explain why it is. But how can React specifically help us? Why might we want React in addition to JavaScript? For this, I built a very simple demo here, a simple website which has some interactivity, as you will see in the next lecture. And in the next lecture, I will show you how we can build this website and the interactivity it has with just JavaScript, and how the code would then look like with React in addition to JavaScript. And that will then make it clear why using React could be a good idea. This is a very simple demo here. I have some content on the page, and when I click delete, I get this overlay where I can confirm or cancel. Now, both buttons don't do anything but close that overlay, as does clicking that backdrop. But what you see on this page here, or what happens when we click delete, all of that is controlled with JavaScript. I got a HTML file with some very basic HTML content, some styling, which we can ignore, and then the magic happens in this app.js file. In there, I got some code that in the end adds a listener to this main button which we got on the screen. So to this delete button here. And when that button is clicked, I fire this show modal handler function. And in there, we run a bunch of JavaScript code to create various elements, divs, paragraphs, and then the cancel and confirm buttons to configure those elements and add text or CSS classes, and to add event listeners to those elements as well, to then fire that close modal handler function, which in the end removes the overlay, this modal as we call it. And then still in the show modal handler function, I got some code that combines all those created elements and brings them onto the screen. This is the JavaScript code responsible for opening this overlay here. Now it works and it's not too bad, but it's quite some code for this simple action. And here we only got one to-do in this demo application. If we would add multiple to-dos, if we would repeat this HTML code multiple times to render more to-dos on the page, or to even render those to-dos dynamically after fetching them from a database, for example, this code would become far more difficult, far more complex. For example, I couldn't just select a button on the page with that query selector, because we would have multiple delete buttons for multiple to-dos, and we would have to make sure that for different to-dos, different overlays are opened, and when we confirm the deletion, the correct to-do is deleted. We're not even doing that here in this demo, but that would be more complexity which we have to add and handle if we build a more realistic app here, a more realistic website. And therefore, just JavaScript works and can sometimes be a good choice, but it can also reach its limits. And one of the reasons is that with just JavaScript, you have to write every single step that should be taken. We want to create an element. We want to set its content. We want to add classes. We want to add a click listener. Then what should happen on that click listener? Every single step needs to be described. This way of programming and bringing something onto the screen is called an imperative approach. We simply describe action after action, step after step. And that can reach its limits. And in addition, even if we don't reach any limits, we as a developer have to take care about all the nitty-gritty details. We have to run the low-level code for creating a button, for setting its text content. And therefore, in the end, we reinvent the wheel over and over again, doing repetitive tasks. Now here's the same example with React. This works in exactly the same way, but the code looks very different. I got a React project here, and as a side note, you find both code repositories, both code snapshots attached. And here in React.js, this might look a bit more complex. We got more files involved here, but that's something we're going to learn throughout the course, why we have multiple files. But in the end, this is the main code that's responsible for bringing this to-do onto the screen. And what's very interesting here is that we have like a custom HTML component here, a custom HTML element. And indeed, React is all about those components. React is all about splitting your application into small building blocks, small components, where every building block, every component has a clear task, and therefore your code stays maintainable and manageable, and React, the library, will do the heavy lifting of rendering something on the screen and of combining all your code. So for example, if we look into the code for this custom element which we built here, which lives in this to-do.js file, then we here again see that I have some HTML code for rendering a to-do, but that we have some kind of placeholder in here, and then some kind of other code which we don't fully understand yet, but which we will understand and learn about throughout this course. And in the end, that's the code responsible for rendering such a to-do, and for rendering the modal, this overlay here, as well, and for rendering it conditionally. And what's interesting here is that even though we don't understand this code yet, and even though it's certainly strange that we have HTML code in JavaScript files, even though that's all weird, we can definitely see that we don't have a bunch of step-by-step instructions here. Instead, we kind of define what we want to have as an end result, and then we have some placeholders, some flexible elements there. And then we have very simple instructions here, which in the end then will be processed by React to change what's visible on the screen. And all these low-level instructions for creating elements and setting text content and so on, those instructions are not written by us when using React. Instead, they will be written or defined, if you want to call it like this, by the React library. We as a React developer work on a higher level, which makes working with React and which makes building complex user interfaces way easier. And that is why we want to use React.js. It makes building modern, rich, complex user interfaces easier, and it does so by giving us a higher level syntax where we write code in a declarative way, in a declarative component focused way. We define what we want to have on the screen, what the end goal is. We create these custom HTML elements, and React will do the rest. And one side effect, for example, is that if we wanted more than one to do, we could just copy that custom element, change maybe that text, that configuration, and boom, we got a second to do here. And we got a button on that to do which works as well. And that is why we use technologies or frameworks like React. Now, because things get easier with React and because we can build those rich user interfaces with React and JavaScript, when working with React, we often build so-called single-page applications. Because whilst we can use React to control parts of a HTML page, let's say some interactive sidebar, and therefore we add a widget, you could say, to a page where only a part of the page is controlled with React, it is more common to control the entire page with React, which means that we use React for everything we see on the screen and even for switching pages. So when we click on a link and we load a new page, as I did with Netflix when I clicked on my list, it looks to the user as if we switched a page, but we actually don't request a new HTML file from some server. Instead, we just used JavaScript through React.js to change what's visible on the screen. And that often leads to a smoother UI and a better user experience, as you see it at the example of Netflix. It's built with React, and there we never request a second HTML page. Hence, it's a single-page application where, after the initial request to the site, React takes over and controls what we see on the screen. Now, this course is about React, but it is worth noting that there are alternatives to React.js. Now we're going to focus on React here, and React is one of the most popular front-end frameworks or libraries, however you want to call it, you can learn. It's a lean and focused component-based UI library. It really focuses on this component thing, and it doesn't have a lot of other features built in. If you need other features like routing, which we are of course going to learn about in detail in this course, then you need to install an extra third-party library. And that will sometimes be the case when working with React, that you need to install third-party libraries to add certain pieces of functionality to your application. Because React itself really just focuses on these components, which we're going to learn about in greater detail later, what exactly they are and how we create them, and how it then renders these components and your user interface onto the screen. That's the focus of React, and extra functionality, which you might need for your React app, therefore sometimes has to be added with help of some third-party package. Now, an alternative to React, which has more built-in features, would be Angular, another very important and very popular front-end framework. And I got a course on this as well. Angular is a complete component-based UI framework, so it also focuses on components, just like React, but it ships more built-in features than React. It also embraces TypeScript right from the start. And it can be overkill for smaller projects, therefore, since it has way more features built in. But for large projects, on the other hand, you don't need to rely on the community as much, because there's more built into that framework. So that's simply a little consideration you have to make. The syntax also looks a bit differently because whilst it is component focused, building these components works a bit differently with Angular than it does with React. Again, I got a course on that if you want to check out Angular as well. And we also have another very popular framework, another popular alternative, and that would be Vue.js. Vue.js is kind of like the mixture of Angular and React, in between those two extremes, if you want to call it like this. It's also a complete component-based UI framework, and it also includes a lot of features, but a bit less features than Angular, but more than React. It includes core features like routing, for example, and therefore with Vue, you also have to rely less on the community, and still you don't have as much overload, possibly, as you might have with Angular, depending on what you build. I also got a more detailed comparison video on these three technologies in case you're interested in that. Now, all three are super popular. React currently is probably the most popular, but all three are great. I got courses on all three, and therefore checking those out might be a good idea as well. But this course, of course, is about React, and therefore let's not lose any time. Let's dive right in. Now, as part of this first course section, I also want to give you an overview of what you can expect from this course and which topics will be covered. Now, of course, you maybe already had a look at the course curriculum, and you absolutely should take a brief look at least, because this is a huge course, and I can't pack all the content that's in the course into this one lecture here. I don't want to turn this into a 20-minute lecture, and in addition, I kept this course updated in the past, and I kept adding new content from time to time. And I do plan to do that in the future. So the curriculum you see on the course page is always up to date. The content here in this video is just a summary of the most important features. There's way more in the course, so definitely check out that full curriculum in addition. Now, with that out of the way, this course is organized into three main categories of course sections, you could say. And the first category of sections is about the basics, the foundation of React. These will be sections that cover core features which React offers to you, which you have to know no matter which React app you're building. Now, the second category of course sections then is about more advanced concepts. So this course does not stop after the basics. Instead, we are going to dive into a lot of advanced concepts as well. These are the concepts which you need for real apps, which you really want to push to production, I would say. These are concepts which you don't need in every app, but realistically, you will need them in a lot of apps. And that's why we're also going to dive into such advanced concepts in depth in this course. Now, the last kind of course sections and content which you'll find in this course will be sections that contain summaries or refreshers on certain concepts, ensuring that we're all on the same page and that you got a single place to go to, well, summarize the core concepts you learned about. But let's now take a closer look at which kind of content you can expect in detail for these different categories of content. We will, of course, start with the key basics that you have to know. And when you learn React, those core basics will be about components. You will learn that React is all about components and how you can build your own components and how you can combine them and how you can build user interfaces with this component approach React takes. You will also learn how to work with events and data, so how you can listen to button clicks and then change something on the screen. And you will learn about props and state, which probably doesn't tell you anything right now, but which are key React concepts, which I am going to introduce in great detail in this course. Now, since this course is about building user interfaces in the end, of course, you're also going to learn how you can style your React apps and components, how you can make sure that your user interfaces, which you build with React, look the way you want them to look. And I'm also going to introduce you to another key feature called React hooks. You will learn what exactly that is, and you will learn that it is one of the most important concepts of modern React, and therefore, of course, it's also covered in great detail in this course. Now, these 4 boxes on this slide here are not 4 course sections. These concepts, which are listed here in this basics category, are indeed taught through a lot more course sections. This is just a summary of the content you can expect. And if you simply continue with the next lectures and sections, you are going to learn these key concepts step by step, because of course I ordered all the course content and all the course lectures such that you are learning about all those important React features step by step so that everything builds up on each other. Now, as I mentioned, we don't stop after those basics. Instead, we'll directly move from basics to more advanced concepts, and therefore this course also contains sections about working with side effects and refs and what refs are, and more React hooks. And if this all sounds very cryptic right now, that's no problem. This is just an overview, some terms you might have heard about before, which are also covered by this course. You will learn what these concepts are about and how they work throughout this course, of course. Now, we are also going to explore app-wide state management with React's Context API and Redux. React Redux is a third-party library, one of the most important React third-party libraries, and we're going to cover it in detail in multiple sections in this course. And you are also going to learn how you can handle user input with forums, how you can send HTTP requests behind the scenes to store data in a database or fetch data from there. And you're going to learn how to build your own custom hooks and what that actually is. You're also going to learn how to implement routing and what routing is in detail, how you can build a page that gives the user the illusion of having multiple pages, even though it's a single page app, as you learned. You're going to learn how to deploy your React app, and we're, for example, also going to dive into another framework called Next.js, which builds up on React.js, which will make building production-ready React apps even easier. And that will be another huge module on Next.js, which is also included in this course, a little bit later in this course, since that will already be quite advanced then. And there is more. As I said, this is not exhaustive. Have a look at the full course curriculum to see all the content. This is just the general structure of this course and what you can expect from it. Now, as I mentioned, there also are some summary and refresher course sections, and specifically, there is a JavaScript refresher course section. That's the next course section after this one, actually, which is 100% optional, but which you can take to ensure that we're all on the same page regarding JavaScript. Because in that refresher section, I'm going to refresh some core modern JavaScript features, which we're going to use in this course as well. And there will also be a React.js summary module at the end of this course, about which I'll talk in greater detail in the next course lecture, because it turns out that for this course, you actually have more than one possible way of taking this course. But again, I'll dive a bit deeper into that in the next lecture. Now, all that content in this course will be explained in great detail in theory and with small demos and examples, but then we are also going to have a couple of bigger, more realistic course projects and examples where you can practice what you learned and where you see the different concepts come together and where you see how a React app is built by using all those React features. Last but not least, there also are plenty of challenges and exercises for you so that by the end of the course, you can really call yourself a React developer. Now, for this course, I got two different approaches, two different options for you on how to take this course, how to go through that course. The first approach, which I have, which is the recommended one, is the standard approach. With this approach, you simply start in lecture 1 in section 1. I guess you already did that, but you simply then continue lecture by lecture. You maybe code along, you might repeat some concepts, but you go through the entire course step by step in order. Because I built the course such that all the modules build up on each other and you learn React step by step if you simply go through the course in the order I give it to you. You can optionally go through that JavaScript refresher section, which is the next course section, but you can also skip that refresher if you don't need it. And then at the end of the course, I have a React summary module, which basically sums up all the course concepts from the ground up, not diving into them as deeply as the entire course does, but giving you a good overview of what you learned in a very concise way. And you can use this React summary module once you completed the course to get a good wrap up of the course and of what you learned. And also to have this module if you come back to this course in a couple of months or years even. If you want to quickly dive into React again, because maybe you haven't worked with it for a couple of months, and then this summary module can also help you, and you don't have to go through the entire course again. You can instead just take that summary module and save some time. So that's the first approach. Go through the entire course step by step in the recommended order, and then at the end go through that summary module to get a nice summary of what you learned. Now, the alternative approach is the summary approach, as I like to call it. And that approach is for you if you're in a hurry. With this approach, if you decide to take this approach, you simply skip the entire course basically, and you skip forward to that React summary module at the end. Maybe you also go through that JavaScript refresher module first, so that next course section, but that's also optional, of course. So you then skip to the end to this React summary course section, and you go through that summary section first. Because that summary section is built such that you can take it without going through this entire course first. It works standalone. And then it will give you a very concise and compressed way of learning React. You learn about all the core features that you need to know about React in 4 hours. And that's, of course, way faster than if you go through the entire course. Now, it should be needless to say that, of course, we're not going to dive as deeply into React in that summary section as we do in the rest of the course, and that not all concepts are covered there. But it's a quick overview of all the core features, and if you just want to get started with React quickly, going through that summary section is a good idea. You can then still go through the entire course thereafter once you have more time. And that is something I would recommend because, of course, it's this complete course which will teach you React in depth, not the summary course section. There is a reason why this is a huge, very long course, and you can't pack that all into 4 sections. If that would be possible, I would have done it. So that is simply an alternative approach, and you can go with whichever approach works better for you. Now, before we finally get started with React and with writing code, I want to give you a couple of tips and tricks that help you with getting the most out of this course. Of course, this is a video on demand course, and therefore the most important thing you can do when taking this course is that you watch the videos. You should, of course, do that, but watch them at your pace. You got those speed controls in the video player. You can speed me up if I'm going too slow, or slow me down a bit if I'm going too fast. You can also pause and rewind and repeat, and these are all things you should do and take advantage of. It's a video on demand course, no live course. So take advantage of this and go through the course and through the lectures at your pace. It's totally normal that you sometimes will need to repeat a lecture because you maybe didn't fully understand the concept yet. Do that. That is the idea of this course. But also don't just watch the videos, also consider coding along and practicing what you learned. Often in this course, I will tell you to practice something. I will challenge you to try something on your own before we then do it together. But even if I don't do that, always consider pausing and trying something out on your own first before we do it together. Once we did something together, maybe pause and try rebuilding what we just built on your own. These are really crucial steps and tricks that help you get way more out of this course. So definitely consider coding along and practicing, because it is practice that will turn you into an expert at the end. Now, it is 100% normal that at some point when you follow along and when you practice, you will face problems. You will have some errors and you will need to find solutions. And definitely try debugging errors and finding solutions on your own first. Also use the code attachments, which you find on the last lecture of every module, to solve problems on your own. Those code attachments come as links to GitHub, and from GitHub you can download my code snapshots to then compare them to yours. And when you compare my code to yours, when you maybe replace your code with mine temporarily step by step, you should be able to narrow down issues and solve problems on your own. And that is extremely important. As a developer, you need to be able to solve problems on your own. So use what you learned in this course, use Google, and use the code attachments to try and debug and solve problems on your own. Now, of course, you also might sometimes be stuck and you're not able to find a solution on your own. Now, for that, we got a great community here. Help each other and learn together. We got a highly active Discord channel. Attached, you find a link to that channel, which you can join for free. And there you will find a lot of like-minded people, other developers, and you can discuss problems or anything there with them. And we, of course, also have the Q&A board, where you can post questions if you're stuck, but also consider not just posting there, but also try helping others, because it is helping others and diving into problems and solving problems which will turn you into an expert developer at the end. And if you consider these tips and tricks, then you should be able to get a lot out of this course, and there is nothing that would keep you from becoming a React expert. Now we are soon going to get started with writing our own React.js code and working in our own React projects. And we are going to learn about all of React's cool features. Now, for writing React code, you will need a code editor, and any web development editor or IDE can be used. Atom, Sublime Text, WebStorm, whatever you want. My recommendation, and the editor I will use in this course though, is Visual Studio Code. It's a free code editor and it's amazing. So free and amazing is a pretty good combination, and that's why I will use it. You can download and install it for all major operating systems, and therefore this is the editor I will use throughout this course. You can simply visit code.visualstudio.com, download the installer from there, and then simply walk through that installer. It's a standard installer, nothing special there. Now, once you did install Visual Studio Code, you can open it, and once you did open it, it will look something like this. Now, the exact look can differ, but it should look something like this. You can tweak the appearance under View Appearance. For example, I will remove the status bar, and you can then open files or folders through this Open Folder button here, or this File Open or Open Folder button in the File menu. And you can simply open the React projects you are going to work on throughout this course with this editor. So at this point, we don't have a project yet. Later, once we do have projects, simply open those project folders with this editor, and you'll then be able to work on your code. Now, regarding the settings and the styling and the look of this editor, you can of course fine-tune it to your requirements. I'm using a theme here, and you can change it under Preferences, Color Theme, and I'm using the Dark Plus theme here. You can of course also switch to other themes, but I like this Dark Plus theme, so if you want to have that same look, you can use that same theme here. Throughout this course, I will also be a bit zoomed in. Of course, that is something I'm just doing here for this course so that you can view my code without issues. I will also sometimes remove this sidebar, which you can do with View Appearance, Show Sidebar, or with the shortcut you see here. Now, in addition, the great thing about Visual Studio Code is that you can install extensions under View, Extensions. And here I got a bunch of extensions installed, but there aren't many important ones. Most of these extensions have nothing to do with React. There are two extensions I want to mention though. The first one is Prettier. This is an extension which will help with code formatting. Because in Visual Studio Code, if you go to your keyboard shortcuts, there is a Format Document shortcut, which you can bind in case it's not bound for you yet, which you can press once you got some code, and it will then format your code so that it looks nicer. Simply remove redundant white space and so on. So this can help with keeping your code clean and readable. And this shortcut can benefit from this extension which helps with formatting. So installing Prettier might be a good idea. Once you did install it, you might just want to check out your settings under Preferences, Settings, and then search for Format here, and make sure you set your default formatter to Prettier. And then this Format Document shortcut, which I showed you, should use Prettier. Now that's one extension. The other extension, which I use in some course modules, is the Material Icon extension, the Material Icon theme extension. You can download and enable this as well, and I will be using it in some, but not all course sections. This extension will simply change the file icons, the look of the file icons, and therefore, of course, it's 100% optional and you don't need it. And that's all. That is the setup I'm using in this course. This is the editor I'm using in this course, and of course, you can and should tweak it exactly how you want it. I just wanted to introduce you to my setup.